They said no one could hold the bridge. Ryder proved them wrong, until the very end. The evacuation sirens howled like dying beasts as shuttles screamed overhead, streaking toward the sky with trails of flame. Below, the planet tore itself apart in fire and fury. Explosions lit up the dying city like pyres for a fallen civilization. The war had ended, but not with peace, only with panic and betrayal. Ryder stood alone on the fractured causeway connecting the evacuation zone to the last refugee camp. His armor, once gleaming white, was scorched black, cracked in places, the HUD flickering with red warnings, shield integrity 11%. Ammo depleted, power reserves critical. Still, he held the line. Behind him, terrified civilians scrambled past in waves. Cal, humans, hybrids, whatever unity had once existed was now desperation incarnate. One last shuttle waited, engines whining in protest, its ramp open like a yawning mouth to salvation. "Evac status?" Ryder barked into his helmet comm. "Final boarding," came Turan's reply, terse with fear. 90 seconds to lift. You need to fall back." Negative. Ryder adjusted the pulse rifle's settings with worn fingers. Position must be held until they clear atmosphere. That's suicide. Command says, "Tell command they can consider this my resignation." He cut the comm with a bitter smile. He turned to fire another burst down the narrowing bridge, where enemy troops surged forward. The choke point worked. One man with a rifle was worth 20 if he knew where to stand. He dropped 2, maybe 3. Then something moved. A blur in the chaos. A child. Small. Blue-skinned. Alone. Ryder's breath caught. She stood frozen amidst the screaming crowd, clutching a data satchel almost her size. Her eyes, luminous and terrified, searched for a face in a sea of strangers. No one stopped. No one even noticed. Ryder moved. His boots thundered against the cracked ferrocrete as he knelt before her. "Where are your parents?" She flinched, voice barely audible through the war-torn static. "Gone. First bombing." He hesitated. Then gently, "What's your name?" "Syra." He nodded once. "Then live, Syra." He scooped her up with one arm, shield flaring as a shot rang past. Sprinting back toward the shuttle, he dodged debris, lasers, smoke. Every breath, a fight. At the ramp, a Cal officer reached for the child. "Secure her," Ryder ordered. "Last priority evac. Make sure she gets out." The ramp began to rise. Ryder turned back. "Ryder, that's it!" Turan yelled from inside. "She was the last." "I know," he said softly. He sprinted back toward the bridge. As the shuttle roared into the sky, Ryder stood his ground, unloading the last of his rifle into the tide of enemies. Then, a shot found its mark. His chest plate sparked and cracked. He staggered. Another struck his shoulder, his vision blurred. Still, he stood. His hand found the control pad at his belt, the failsafe. He activated it, not to destroy them, but to destroy what they couldn't be allowed to find, the data crystal embedded in his chest plate, the evidence. Behind his visor, his last thought was of blue eyes and a promise. "Run, Syra." And then, silence. 100 years later, the bridge was gone, but Syra still remembered the fire, or thought she did. The city of Navan rose from the ruins of that war, its glimmering spires casting reflections across twin moons. Where once ash and debris had choked the air, now green plazas bloomed and traffic floated on quiet, efficient grav rails. The Cal had rebuilt, progressed, moved on. Syra had too, on the surface. She walked with precise steps through the remains of an old archive complex, her dark blue uniform pressed and flawless. On her shoulder glinted the insignia of an inspector, third caste, subdivision historical preservation. Her file was impeccable, her demeanor even more so. "West Wing's unstable." One of the security drones buzzed at her side. "You have limited window for exploration." "Noted," Syra replied coolly. Her voice had the steady calm of someone used to authority and scrutiny. She moved alone. This was her preference. The others, even Cal officers, still hesitated around her. Perhaps it was her bioluminescent markings, more vivid than most. Or perhaps it was her manner, quiet, intense, and occasionally distracted. She didn't blame them. Not entirely. Even she had never quite felt like she fit, even after 118 years. She paused at a sealed maintenance shaft, her scanner blinking erratically. Something was down there. Her clearance bypassed the lock. The hatch hissed open, and Syra crawled into the narrow tunnel, the stale air thick with silence. Her boots echoed dully against old alloy. At the end, a forgotten storage locker half buried under rubble. Inside it, something metallic. She brushed away dust and debris, revealing a battle-worn human helmet, unmistakable in design, the kind used in the final years of the war, the kind she had only ever seen behind glass, in the curated museums approved by the Truth Service. She turned it in her hands. It was heavy, too real. And inside the rim, just above where the neural link would have rested, was a set of 5 words scratched, uneven, crude, but unmistakable. Syra, find me. I'm alive. Her hands went numb. She nearly dropped it. This had to be some kind of mistake. Or coincidence. But her name wasn't common. Not among the Cal, and certainly not in human languages. How could a century-old human relic bear her name? A flicker of something stirred in her mind. A dream, or a memory. Flames, screams, being lifted by strong arms, a voice through a helmet, distorted but warm. Run! Her heart pounded. She'd been told that was all imagined, that it was trauma-induced memory formation, common in war orphans. A fabrication. But this wasn't imagination. Syra stared at the helmet, at the inscription, at the history that had tried to stay buried, and realized someone had left this for her, deliberately, waiting, and she had found it. Syra didn't report the helmet. She was supposed to. That was protocol. Any artifact of potential historical significance, especially one of human origin, must be logged, scanned, and transferred to the Truth Service within 48 hours. But something deep within her warned against it, an instinct older than logic. Instead, she wrapped the helmet in her field jacket and hid it in a private compartment beneath her quarters. Her pulse hadn't stopped racing since she read the inscription. That night, while the city above pulsed with artificial serenity, Syra sat alone in her quarters with the helmet on the table before her. She activated a secure console, bypassing the public networks to access her caste-level archive permissions. Search. Human soldier. Final evacuation. No matches. She narrowed the query. Added terms. Modified variables. Still nothing concrete. Plenty of references to last stands, heroic resistance, but always generalized, always Cal-centric. Not a single name. No Ryder. Strange. She tried another angle. Evacuation records. Bridge defense. Unidentified human involvement. This time, a few hits. But they were redacted. Every file either marked as corrupted or missing key metadata. Several entries had been consolidated by Truth Service sensors just after the war's end. Her gut twisted. This wasn't sloppy record-keeping, this was intentional obfuscation. And it was working. If she hadn't found the helmet herself, she never would have known Ryder existed. A memory flickered. Dust. Fire. Arms lifting her. Run, Syra. What if it wasn't just memory? What if she had truly been there, and someone had worked very hard to make sure she forgot? She switched tactics. Medical records, child evacuees, memory alteration protocols. This time she struck gold. An old clinical paper buried in the restricted archives outlined a series of post-war adjustment therapies for war orphans. Neural recalibration, memory suppression, dreams rewritten as fiction, trauma sterilized into obedience. Her name was on one of the case studies. Syra of House Taurus, evacuation survivor, subject 462-KT. Recommended therapy, full memory overwrite due to persistent savior delusion. Her hands trembled. They'd erased him, erased her. She stared at the helmet again, at the scratched, desperate message. Find me. I'm alive. It wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon. A message left by someone who knew what would happen, who knew they'd try to erase him, and that Syra was the only one who might someday find the truth. She took a deep breath and began constructing a hidden folder on her personal drive. Into it, she uploaded her findings: helmet scans, archive queries, medical files, and one word typed in bold at the top of the file: Ryder. She didn't know yet if he had survived, but she knew this: they had tried to bury him, and she had just started digging. They told her the war was over, but Syra knew now. Some wars just change uniforms. 3 days after discovering the helmet, Syra forged a falsified inspection directive bearing the seal of the Historical Preservation Authority. She attached it to a high-clearance datapad and dressed in full inspector regalia. The destination? Quarantine Zone 7, officially marked as an irradiated no-entry zone, left contaminated by experimental weapons during the war. In truth, it was a sealed Cal military installation, the site of the last human command post. She had neither permission nor precedent, but her position gave her enough weight, and in a society obsessed with hierarchy, most guards didn't question paperwork that looked authoritative. At the checkpoint, the soldier scanned her forged credentials. "This is unusual," he muttered. Syra didn't blink. New directive from the High Caste: reassessment of legacy zones for structural decay and potential historical recovery. A pause, then a nod. "Cleared for Section 5 Alpha only. Surveillance drone will accompany." Of course it will, Syra thought grimly. Inside the facility, the air was cold and sterile. Lights flickered above narrow corridors that hadn't seen true foot traffic in decades. The surveillance drone floated just behind her, watching. She moved deliberately, playing her role well, scanning walls, recording fake voice notes, tagging debris. But she had a plan. In the hallway marked communications, a support beam jutted out just far enough to briefly block the drone's line of sight. It was all she needed. Syra slipped a magnetic override device from her coat and attached it beneath the drone. Instantly, its sensors looped. A blind spot. "Sub-level conduits need inspection," she said aloud. "Detected anomalies in radiation readouts." The drone processed her false input, nodded, and hovered in place. "Proceed. You have 15 minutes before reevaluation." Perfect. She ducked through a side hatch into a forgotten service corridor. At its end, an old control lab, lights still functional, screens glowing faintly. Someone had been here recently. She wasn't alone. "You're not truth, service," a voice rasped. She spun, hand instinctively reaching for her concealed sidearm. An old Cal male stood in the shadows, but something about him was wrong. The ridges of his face were subtly asymmetrical. His eyes too wide. And beneath his robes, she could see cybernetic implants, human designs modified to interface with Cal biology. A hybrid, a half-breed. "You're not full Cal," Syra said carefully. He gave a crooked smile. "Neither are you. Not completely. Not up here." He tapped his head. She held up the helmet, watching his face. "I'm looking for this man," she said. He stepped closer, eyes widening in genuine recognition. "You found it," he whispered. "After all this time." "You knew him?" Syra asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out a trembling hand, fingers brushing the helmet's surface as if touching a ghost. "This belonged to Ryder," he said at last. "The last real human soldier. The one they never meant to remember." Her breath caught. "He was real?" He met her gaze. "Oh yes. Real enough to scare the High Caste into rewriting history. Real enough to save hundreds before the end. Including..." He studied her face. Something flickered in his eyes. "You don't remember, do you?" She tensed. "What?" "You were the child on the bridge." Syra froze. Her mind reeled. Flames, screams, arms lifting her. A voice in her ear. "Run!" "It wasn't a dream," the old man said gently. "They made you forget. They made you all forget. They had to." She sank into the nearest bench, the helmet clutched to her chest. Why? Because if anyone remembered what Ryder did, what the humans really did, it would unravel everything. The narrative, the unity, the myth of sacrifice built only on Cal blood. They needed heroes, but only Cal ones. A slow horror bloomed in her chest. "They didn't just erase Ryder," she whispered. "They erased gratitude." He nodded. "They erased truth." Syra barely made it back to her quarters. The old hybrid had vanished in a burst of smoke and flame, a self-detonated trap. Whether to protect her or to erase himself, she couldn't say. But the moment she emerged from the tunnel beneath Quarantine Zone 7, she knew everything had changed. They were watching her. 3 days later, the Truth Service came for her. They didn't knock. Her apartment door opened with a system override, and 8 agents in unmarked black uniforms stormed in with military precision. "Inspector Syra of House Taurus," the lead agent barked. "You are detained under Article 14B of the Historical Integrity Mandate." They had her name, her title, and her scent of guilt. Violation of secured zones, unauthorized possession of restricted artifacts, contact with dissident elements. Hand over the human relic immediately. Syra kept her expression neutral. "I've complied with all preservation protocols. The artifact is in secure archive custody, pending documentation review." "Lieutenant, it was hidden beneath the maintenance floor of her building, inside a sealed compartment alongside rations and a desert cloak. Preparation for what came next." The agents searched her apartment, every drawer, panel, and vent, found nothing. Without evidence, they couldn't imprison her indefinitely, not someone of her caste. But they could bring her in, for questioning. Truth Service headquarters was a brutalist monstrosity. Gray stone and black alloy, built not to harmonize but to intimidate. Inside, Syra was escorted through a labyrinth of corridors and checkpoints until she reached a windowless interrogation room. They left her alone for 6 hours. Standard practice: disorient, exhaust, destabilize. But Syra had read their tactics. She used the time to rehearse her answers, fix her heartbeat, lock down her nerves. When the door finally opened, she was surprised. The man who entered wasn't a guard. He was a high-caste administrator, dressed in slate-gray robes, his expression unreadable. "Inspector Syra," he said calmly. "We regret the escalation, but the circumstances required swift action." "You broke into my home," she replied evenly. "You forced our hand." He activated a holographic projector in the center of the room. "Let's begin with this." A security feed appeared, her conversation with the hybrid, partially reconstructed from sound and thermal data. "You were aware surveillance could be active," the administrator said. "Yet you pursued a known dissident. Why?" "I didn't know what he was until I saw him." "And yet, you stayed. You listened. You presented the artifact." Syra said nothing. He changed the feed. Now it showed brain scans, tagged with her name and medical ID. "You were treated for memory fragmentation as a child, post-trauma recalibration therapy. You recall?" "I was told I had nightmares." "You had memories," the administrator corrected, "of a human rescuer, a psychological defense. Not uncommon. We corrected it." "No." Syra's voice hardened. "You deleted it." The administrator tilted his head. "We preserved your functionality, your purpose, and we protected social cohesion." He tapped the console. The image changed again. Now it was a video, grainy, old, yet eerily clear. A man in battle-damaged armor appeared, breathing hard, face lined with exhaustion. A human, eyes sharp, voice calm. The room went still. "If you're watching this," the man said, "it means I'm dead, or very close. It also means you found it." Syra's breath caught. "I'm Ryder. I held the bridge. I saved who I could, and I was betrayed for it." He leaned closer. "They didn't want survivors, not human ones. The Cal-High caste brokered peace by offering our coordinates. The enemy didn't find us. They were led to us." The administrator moved to shut it off. Syra slammed her hand down. "Let it play," Ryder continued. "I was supposed to die. But I didn't. I hid. I watched. I recorded everything. And if you're watching this, Syra, it means you remember, even if they tried to make you forget." His voice cracked. "You ran. I saw it. I made sure of it. Now I need you to run again. With the truth. Find the archive. Find the rest." The screen fizzled. Syra sat frozen. The administrator exhaled slowly. A fabrication, desperate fiction, a relic's dying delusion. You knew, she whispered. You knew this existed. He nodded. And you erased it anyway. Of course we did, he said coldly. Some truths are poison. They unmake order. Syra's hands clenched. You don't protect truth, she said. You bury it. And now, he said, pressing a button, we must bury you again. The door opened. 2 agents entered with a neural reconditioning kit. Prepare her for memory recalibration. Syra stood, and for the first time in her life, she chose to fight. The lights died just as they brought the neural recalibrator. The interrogation room plunged into darkness, emergency red lighting kicking in a second later. The Truth Service agents cursed, disoriented. Power surge? No. An internal breach. Syra didn't hesitate. While one guard fumbled with the device, she slammed an elbow into the other's throat, grabbed his baton, and swept his legs. The first recovered too slowly. She drove the shock baton into his side. Hard. They crumpled. Her heart thundered. She yanked a clearance badge off one of them, burst out the door, and into a facility in chaos. Alarms blared. Personnel shouted. The intercom repeated, "Security breach in Sector 7. All forces respond." Repeat. Level 3 breach. Smoke curled through the hallways. Systems flickered. Someone had planned this. Someone was buying her time. But who? No time to wonder. She moved fast, using service tunnels and shadowed corners, making her way toward the evidence vault. If they found the helmet, it would vanish forever. She arrived seconds too late. The vault door stood open. Bodies lay inside. Agents neutralized with surgical precision. The helmet was gone. In its place, a small data crystal, etched with a mark she hadn't seen in decades. A stylized R, the same symbol that had been scratched into Ryder's shoulder plate in the video. A message. She pocketed it and ran. 20 minutes later, she emerged from a maintenance tunnel 2 blocks away, blood on her sleeve and ash in her lungs. Every info terminal across the district now displayed her face. Wanted. Dissident. Dangerous. She didn't care. She had a destination now. The old hybrid had told her where to go. The southern mountains. The waterfall cave. Recognition code. Promise kept. She ran. Avoided scanners. Slept in alleyways. Traveled only at night. Every moment was hunted breath. 3 days later, she stood before the thunder of falling water, heart pounding. Behind the cascade, stone, nothing visible. She stepped into the freezing current, pressed against the slick rock wall. A hum. A blue light scanned her. "State recognition code," a voice demanded. Human. Old. "Promise kept," she whispered. A shimmer. The wall vanished. A hidden door hissed open. She stepped into darkness. Lights blinked on, guiding her through a long tunnel. Cold, sterile, human. The air smelled of old metal and recycled life. At the end, the tunnel opened into a habitat dome, overgrown but alive. Hydro gardens, air processors, dimming artificial sunlight above, and silence. No guards, no drones. But something was awake. She followed the only active system, a glowing console pulsing in the center. One chamber lit up at her approach. She stepped closer. A cryopod. Frosted. Labeled in old Earth script. It cleared. And inside, an old man. Beard gray, skin pale, muscles faded, but frame unmistakable. The same face from the video, lined with time, but alive. Ryder. He stirred, eyes opened, took her in. "You came," he rasped, voice raw, dry as desert wind. "I knew you would." Syra stepped forward, breath shuddering. "I found the helmet. I left it for you," he whispered. "Took a century, but you found me. You saved me," she said. "And now you'll save the truth," he answered, eyes gleaming. "Help me up. We have work to do." They didn't have long. Ryder leaned heavily on Syra as they moved through the underground sanctuary. Each step a memory, each hallway a monument to the war no one wanted to remember. She guided him into the central archive chamber, dimly lit, lined with data cores and memory crystals, each containing truths the world above refused to face. This place he said, voice rasping. It was meant to be a vault, a seed, if anyone ever woke up. And now it's waking, Syra said, helping him to a terminal. Because of you. He shook his head. Because of you. I just planted the truth. You're the one carrying it now. As Syra began downloading the archive files into portable drives, the facility's alarm screamed. They'd been found. Ryder swore, pulling a rusted sidearm from a hidden compartment. They tracked you here. They must have followed the disruption at Truth Service HQ. Is there another way out? 2. Backup tunnels. But they take time to open. You have to finish the download first. He limped toward the entry corridor. I'll buy you that time. You can barely stand. I can still shoot. Syra hesitated, then tossed him a fresh power cell from the supply case. Then make it count. The door shuddered under the impact of a breaching charge. Stay low, Ryder warned. The wall blew inward in a bloom of light and pressure. Truth Service soldiers stormed in. Ryder opened fire. He moved like an echo of his old self, slower but precise. For every step they advanced, he made them pay. Meanwhile, Syra finished the final data transfer, slipping the crystal into a reinforced pouch. Ryder, we're clear, he nodded. Go! Back tunnel C, right corridor, second hatch. I'm not leaving you. You have to. The truth matters more than either of us. The gunfire intensified. Ryder's sidearm hissed as its power pack drained. He tossed it aside, picked up a fallen rifle. Behind him, more soldiers poured in. Syra's mind raced. She activated a security override on the console, rerouting power from hydroponics to door locks. The facility groaned as barriers slammed shut behind her, forcing the attackers to funnel through Ryder's position. He turned, just once, and smiled. You ran before, he said. Now run with fire. She backed away, heart hammering. He stood alone at the choke point. One man, one last stand. Just like before. Syra didn't stop running. Even after the final door sealed behind her, even after Ryder's last stand faded into silence, she kept going. Through narrow tunnels, through thorned brush and ash-strewn ravines. Her limbs burned, her lungs tore, but her grip never loosened around the crystal drive. She didn't look back. She couldn't. By the time she reached the outer districts, the sun was rising, muted behind pollution haze. She blended into the refugee crowds, wrapped in dirt and desperation, until she reached the first working terminal connected to the intraplanetary web grid. She plugged in the crystal. The screen blinked. Accessing Ryder archive, full sequence. No fire, no explosion, just a flicker. And then truth surged. Across every public network, every street projector, every secure terminal inside the highest towers of power, the truth played. The footage began with Ryder's testimony, but it didn't stop there. It showed the betrayals, the bribes, the genocide orders signed in coded ink, the trade deals with the invaders, exchanging human positions for peace treaties. People across the continent paused, watched, listened. Some screamed, some fell to their knees, some refused to believe, until the classified logs of Truth Service themselves began pouring out. Names, dates, signatures, confirmations. The system stuttered, collapsed. Within hours, every ministry building was locked down. Protests exploded. Truth Service officers went into hiding. Entire planetary sectors declared administrative independence. By nightfall, news anchors spoke with trembling voices. We have confirmation from multiple sources. Ryder Cal is real. He lived, he fought, and he was right. On the roof of an abandoned tower, Syra sat beneath flickering sky signs. She had no plan beyond this, just the silence. And then, a signal pinged, encrypted, unknown origin. She accessed it. A text-only message unfolded. The world owes you, but it still needs you. If you're ready to finish what he started, meet us. Coordinates attached. Syra stared at the message, wind catching her hood. She didn't know who us was, but she knew one thing. She wasn't alone anymore. The meeting point was a ruins, an old observatory buried in the cliffs of the northern range, shattered glass, rusted domes, and silence thick as history. But as Syra approached, something pulsed beneath the decay. Power, life. She found them inside. Not soldiers, not rebels, but historians, engineers, exiled thinkers, human, Callan, mixed. People who had known Ryder or believed him. People who had been waiting for someone like her. One of them, a Cal woman with cybernetic eyes, offered her tea. "We don't expect you to lead," she said gently, "but we need your voice. You saw the truth." Syra didn't answer right away. She had spent her whole life enforcing a lie. Now that truth had cracked the surface. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. But when she looked around, she saw something Ryder never got to see in his time. Dialogue, collaboration, hope. Cities were still burning, protests still raged, but in pockets across the planet, people were talking. Truth, service, fractured into splinter cells, some hiding, some defecting. The Cal elite were being challenged openly by their own youth, who now questioned everything they'd been taught. In one broadcast, a young Cal commander said, voice trembling, "We can't undo what was done, but we can choose what comes next." And for the first time in over a century, monuments to humans were no longer being erased, but rebuilt. Syra stood before one of them weeks later, a statue of Ryder, not as a warrior, but as a man with an outstretched hand, offering, not demanding. Behind her, children of both species played together, chasing drones in the dust. A mother nearby whispered to her son, pointing, "That's the man who gave us back our real history." Syra felt something shift in her chest, not guilt, not grief, but a strange, quiet hope. 3 months later, Syra returned to the cliff where it all began. The wind was quieter now. The scorched ridges of the southern range had started to bloom again, green shoots defying ash. Below, in the valley where once only ruins stood, a new settlement had risen. They called it Kalem, a word from old earth tongues meaning healed memory, built not by one species, but two. Humans and Cal worked side by side, laying foundations, sharing tools, debating loudly over architecture and color schemes. Children ran between them, laughing in languages no one had bothered to separate anymore. Syra sat on the edge of the lookout station, once a command post, now converted into a school, and watched the sun rise over Kalem. She could hear Ryder's voice sometimes in the silence, not as a ghost, but as a rhythm she carried. Truth, after all, had never been about monuments or battles. It had always been about memory and the courage to keep it alive. She placed a small stone on the cairn beside her, one among many. Each stone marked someone who had fought or lost or dared to believe. Ryder's was near the top. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Behind her, the door creaked open. A young girl stepped out, half Cal, half human, big amber eyes, a datapad tucked under her arm. "Are the archives real?" she asked, voice soft. Syra turned, smiling. "All of them," she said, "and more." The girl sat beside her, swinging her legs. "I want to tell stories too," she said. "Not just the ones they teach, the ones that feel real." Syra looked at her, at the dust on her boots and the light in her eyes, and nodded. "Then you will," she said. "And maybe someday someone will sit here and read your story." They sat in silence, watching the dawn rise on a world trying to become something better. And far, far in the distance, the stars waited, quiet and endless. But not forgotten. Never again.